You ever heard someone talk so confidently you just know pride is about to knock them flat? Well, picture this. A glass-walled office high above the city, marble floors shining, and a CEO in his crisp suit smirking like he owns not just the building but everyone inside it. And what does he say? "Beat me in chess and I'll marry you." Sounds ridiculous already, right? Who talks like that? But he wasn't joking. This man, rich, white, powerful, was throwing out challenges as if life were some kind of game only he could win. And who's standing nearby, broom in hand, pretending not to hear? The janitor, a black man, quiet, overlooked, invisible to most of the office. You know the type of invisibility I'm talking about, don't you? The kind that comes with skin color in a room full of privilege. Now tell me, wouldn't you laugh at a CEO thinking chess is about ego and not strategy? He leaned back, feet on his desk, talking to his boardroom, cracking jokes about how no woman had ever outsmarted him. "Brains and beauty," he said, "but never both." Oh, the arrogance dripping off every word. And while the room chuckled, that janitor was listening, sweeping in small circles, eyes catching the chessboard polished and waiting on the table. Funny thing about silence, it hides storms. Have you ever seen someone underestimate the wrong person? That's where this story takes a sharp turn. Because arrogance, well, it loves an audience. The CEO noticed the janitor's glance at the board. And what does he do? He laughs, loud and cruel. "What about you? Think you can handle me in a game? Tell you what, if you checkmate me, I'll hand you my entire company. And if I win, well, you'll still be sweeping floors." Everybody roared with laughter, like it was the funniest thing ever said. But wasn't it also the cruelest? And there stood the janitor, shoulders straight, eyes calm, and lips curled into, oh, the faintest smile. You ever see a man so sure of himself without even moving? That smile said one thing clear as day. The game was already over. So when he spoke, the whole room froze. "Set the pieces, sir. Let's play." The board was set. Polished wood shining under the fluorescent lights. Pieces lined like soldiers waiting for orders. The CEO cracked his knuckles and grinned, confident as a lion facing a lamb. "3 moves," he boasted. "That's all I need." Can you imagine the arrogance? 3 moves. The janitor didn't flinch. He just sat down slowly, calloused hands resting on the edge of the table, his uniform still smelling faintly of cleaning solution. No suit, no tie, no shiny watch. Just quiet strength wrapped in humility. And let me ask you, how many people in that room were rooting for him? Not one. They smirked, whispered, rolled their eyes. Because in their minds, a black janitor had no business touching a chessboard in front of their white, all-powerful boss. But let's pause for a second. Isn't it funny how people equate wealth with intelligence? As if money automatically makes you smarter. The CEO had studied business, not chess. His ego was his education. The janitor, on the other hand, had learned from life, from battles no paycheck could prepare you for. You think nights of struggle don't sharpen a man's mind? You think years of being underestimated don't teach strategy? Oh, he was ready. The CEO slid his pawn forward with a flourish. First move, showy, careless. The janitor responded with calm precision, eyes never leaving the board. No wasted motion, no hesitation, just strategy whispering from every fingertip. The room quieted, the laughter dying down because something in his stillness demanded respect. "Don't overthink it," the CEO sneered, chuckling at his own joke. But who was really overthinking now? Each move the janitor made seemed to ink that grin a little more. Pawn here, knight there, the pattern emerging like a storm cloud only he could see. And the CEO? He leaned in, confusion flickering behind his arrogance. "Now, tell me, have you ever watched a man realize too late that the ground under his feet was sinking? That was happening in real time. 1 move, 2 moves, and by the 3rd, the janitor leaned back, folded his arms, and with the softest voice said, "Checkmate." Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. The CEO's jaw dropped. The boardroom gasped. 3 moves, exactly as he had bragged. Only he was the one finished. And in that moment, power shifted. Everything changed. Can you imagine the taste of humiliation? It's bitter, sharp, like swallowing glass. The CEO's face turned pale, then flushed red, his smirk melting into disbelief. He stuttered, staring at the board as if the pieces had betrayed him. But pieces don't lie, moves don't lie, strategy doesn't lie, and in front of his employees, in front of his pride, he was stripped bare. 3 moves, just 3. Tell me, isn't it ironic how words meant to mock can turn into prophecies? The janitor sat quietly, no gloating, no celebration, just that steady calm. And maybe that silence was more powerful than any victory dance, because silence, in that room, screamed louder than laughter ever could. You ever seen people so shocked they forget how to breathe? That's what it looked like. Every single employee, frozen, wide-eyed, some biting their lips to hold back nervous giggles, others stealing glances at each other like, did that really just happen? And then, the CEO slammed his fist on the table, pieces rattled, a pawn tipped over, but nothing could erase the truth staring up at him. He had been beaten, not by another executive, not by some grandmaster, but by the man whose name he never bothered to learn. The man who scrubbed the floors while they walked past like he was part of the furniture. Isn't it tragic how often society measures a person's worth by their paycheck? The janitor finally spoke, his voice steady, almost gentle. A game is a game, sir. Respect doesn't come from titles, it comes from humility. Ouch, can you feel that sting? That wasn't just a lesson in chess, it was a lesson in life, one the CEO had never expected to be schooled on. But pride is a stubborn beast. Instead of admitting defeat gracefully, the CEO laughed nervously, pretending it was all a joke. Beginner's luck, he muttered, forcing a smile that fooled no one. Have you ever seen a man drowning while pretending to swim? That's exactly what it looked like. And the janitor? He simply stood, straightened his uniform, and prepared to walk away. Because real strength doesn't need applause. Real victory doesn't need noise. Sometimes the quietest man in the room holds the sharpest blade. And that day, the janitor's silence cut deeper than any insult ever could. But you know what's dangerous about pride? It doesn't die easily. The CEO couldn't let it go. His voice rose, cracking under the weight of his own embarrassment. Again, he demanded, eyes flashing with desperation. Best out of 3. The room shifted uncomfortably. Have you ever noticed how people look away when power starts to crumble? Nobody wanted to witness their boss unraveling, yet nobody could stop staring. It was like watching a tower collapse in slow motion. The janitor tilted his head, calm as ever. Sir, the game is already finished. Sometimes one lesson is enough. Imagine the courage it took to say that, standing in a room where every gaze judged him, where history itself whispered that men like him should stay quiet, stay small, stay invisible. But he refused invisibility that day. He was seen, and his words carved through the tension like a knife. The CEO laughed again, louder this time, but laughter laced with panic. Don't flatter yourself. You think a fluke makes you smarter than me? Than us? And there it was. Us. That ugly little RD dividing the room between those who sat at the table and those who cleaned under it. Isn't it strange how fast masks slip when pride gets bruised? The employees exchanged glances, some uncomfortable, some secretly thrilled to see arrogance crumble. One brave voice, soft but audible, whispered, "It wasn't a fluke, sir." And just like that, the room's air shifted. Because the truth has a way of slipping out, no matter how tightly it's chained. The CEO pointed a trembling finger at the janitor. You think you can humiliate me in my own office? But what he didn't realize was this. Humiliation only grows when you refuse humility. The janitor didn't gloat, didn't taunt, didn't even smile. He simply adjusted his cap and said, "Respect isn't given, it's earned. And today I earned yours, whether you admit it or not." Tell me, doesn't that line stick with you? Doesn't it sting even more than the checkmate itself? Because chess was just the battlefield. The real war was over dignity, over humanity. And in that war, the janitor was already victorious. The room knew it, the employees knew it, and deep down, though he'd never admit it, the CEO knew it too. Pride may roar, but truth whispers, and it lingers. Now here's the thing about moments like this. They don't just vanish. They stick to people's memories like glue. By the next morning, whispers had spread across the office faster than wildfire. Did you hear? The janitor beat the boss in 3 moves. Every hallway, every break room, every buzzing phone carried the story. And tell me, don't people love seeing the mighty stumble? Of course they do, especially when arrogance is what made them mighty in the first place. But the CEO, oh, he couldn't stand it. His pride was bleeding, and nothing stings like a wound to the ego. He stormed into the office that morning, slamming his briefcase, barking orders, pretending he was still untouchable. Yet every time he walked past an employee, he felt the weight of their hidden smirks. Every laugh in the distance sounded like it was about him. That's the price of humiliation. You start hearing ghosts of laughter even in silence. Meanwhile, the janitor just kept doing his job, sweeping floors, wiping windows, emptying trash bins. No bragging, no boasting, no retelling of the story. And isn't that the most powerful response of all? To win, then return to your routine as if victory was just another Tuesday? That humility burned the CEO even more than defeat itself. Now here's where it gets twisted. The CEO decided to turn the loss into a joke. In a meeting, he smirked and said, "Guess I need to practice my chess, huh? Maybe the janitor will give me lessons." Everyone forced polite chuckles, but you could feel the discomfort. Because no matter how he tried to laugh it off, the truth hung in the air. He had been beaten fair and square. And then came the kicker. A young intern, nervous but bold, muttered under his breath, "3 moves." The words sliced through the room like a blade. People bit their lips, stifling giggles, while the CEO's face froze in rage. Isn't it funny how 2 tiny words can carry the weight of an entire empire crumbling? The janitor didn't need to say a thing. The story was alive, breathing, unstoppable, and every time the CEO tried to bury it, it only grew louder. That's the power of truth. It doesn't stay buried, no matter how much money or power you throw on top of it. By now, the story had spilled far beyond the office walls. You know how gossip works. It travels through whispers, rides emails, dances on social media until it becomes unstoppable. Someone had snapped a blurry photo of the game, the janitor leaning back with that calm look, the CEO's face frozen in disbelief. The caption? Just 2 words. 3 moves. And once those words hit the internet, the whole city seemed to know. The CEO's colleagues from other companies started calling, some with fake sympathy, others with sly laughter hiding behind, and their voices. His reputation, built over years of ruthless deals and arrogant speeches, was wobbling like a tower in an earthquake. Isn't it strange how quickly people love to watch a king fall? They cheered privately because his downfall made their world feel a little more just. Meanwhile, the janitor still came in every morning, mop in hand, head held high. But people looked at him differently now, not invisible anymore. Suddenly, folks who had never spoken to him before were nodding, smiling, even whispering, "Good game." Imagine that shift, from ghost to legend, all because of a single moment of courage. Doesn't it make you wonder how many great minds are hidden behind uniforms we ignore? The CEO tried damage control. He called a staff meeting, voice booming, insisting everyone focus on real work. But guess what? Every time he raised his voice, people remembered the image of him speechless at that chessboard. Authority cracked, respect dissolved. And tell me, what's a leader without respect? Just a man shouting into the wind. One evening, unable to bear it, he confronted the janitor in private. His voice low, bitter. "You embarrassed me. Do you know what you've done?" And the janitor, calm as ever, replied, "I didn't embarrass you, sir. Your pride did that. I just played the game you invited me to play." That line, it hit like thunder. Because wasn't it true? Nobody forced the CEO to open his mouth. Nobody pushed him to mock. His own arrogance dug the hole he fell into. And isn't that the cruel beauty of justice? Sometimes it doesn't come from courts or protests. It comes in the form of a chessboard, 3 moves, and the quiet dignity of a man who refused to stay invisible. Now here's the part nobody expected. Instead of fading away, the story only grew louder. Journalists caught wind of it, spinning headlines like, "Janitor outsmarts CEO in 3 moves." Late-night hosts joked about it on television, mimicking the CEO's cocky smirk, then collapsing into mock defeat. Can you picture it? Millions laughing at his expense. And isn't that the cruelest punishment for arrogance, becoming a punchline? The CEO's board of directors wasn't laughing, though. Behind closed doors, they were fuming. Their golden boy, their symbol of power, was now the butt of every joke. They asked themselves, if a man can't handle a janitor, how can he handle billion-dollar deals? Doubt poisoned the room, and once doubt seeps in, it spreads like mold. Meanwhile, employees began to rally quietly around the janitor. Some started asking him for chess tips during breaks. Others slipped him encouraging notes. A few even admitted they felt braver just watching him stand up to power without raising his voice. Isn't it amazing how one act of courage can ripple outward, inspiring people who never thought they had a voice? But the CEO, he wasn't finished. Humiliation hardened into hatred. He whispered to confidants, "I'll make sure he regrets it." Have you ever seen a man blinded by pride? He forgot that revenge only digs the grave deeper. Instead of learning humility, he plotted ways to fire the janitor, to strip him of dignity, to erase the story. Only it was too late. The janitor wasn't just a man anymore. He was a symbol, a walking reminder that intellect and strength don't come packaged in skin color, money, or fancy suits. They come from the mind, the heart, and the refusal to bow. One afternoon, an employee nervously asked the janitor, "How did you learn chess?" And his answer, simple, almost poetic. "My father taught me on a broken board with missing pieces. We didn't have much, but we had strategy." Doesn't that paint a picture? A boy growing up with less than nothing, yet finding mastery in patience, in thought, in foresight. And here he was now, proving that brilliance doesn't need privilege, it only needs opportunity. The CEO could try to bury him, but how do you bury a legend already etched into the minds of everyone around you? The pressure kept building until the inevitable happened. The board called an emergency meeting. Imagine that long, polished table. Leather chairs filled with powerful men and women, their faces tight with disapproval. And at the head of the table sat the CEO, trying to pretend he was still untouchable. But respect doesn't answer to pretense, does it? Respect follows truth. They grilled him with questions. How did this happen? Why is our company a laughingstock? He squirmed, sweating, offering excuses, blaming distractions, even daring to call the game a staged trick. But lies are brittle. They snap under the weight of reality. And reality was this. He had been beaten fair and square, in full view of witnesses. No spin could erase that. Meanwhile, the janitor's story was becoming legend outside those walls. Community groups shared it, praising his calm dignity. Chess clubs called him an inspiration. Parents told their children about the man who proved brains beat arrogance every time. Isn't it remarkable how quickly truth spreads when it carries justice in its pocket? The board, tired of excuses, delivered their verdict. Your leadership is compromised. We can't afford the mockery any longer. Stripped of power, the CEO was left staring at the empire he thought untouchable. And isn't that poetic? To lose not from hostile takeovers or corporate rivals, but from a janitor with nothing but a broom and a mind sharp as steel. But here's where the story takes a twist. The janitor, despite all the attention, never demanded a promotion, never begged for recognition. When reporters asked what he wanted, his answer was simple. Respect. That's all I ever wanted. And that's when people started to realize this wasn't about chess. It wasn't even about a company. It was about dignity denied too long. About a system that mocks the unseen until the unseen rises and demands to be acknowledged. And let's be honest, Doesn't that strike a chord with all of us? Haven't we all, at some point, been underestimated, silenced, treated as less than we are? That's why his story spread, because it wasn't just his, it was everyone's. And suddenly, the janitor wasn't a janitor. He was a mirror, reflecting back all the quiet storms we carry inside. The CEO, now stripped of his crown, wandered the city like a ghost. Once he had been the man everyone bowed to, now he was the man whispered about, laughed at, pitied. And isn't that the cruel trick of pride? One day it lifts you high, the next it drops you harder than gravity ever could. He avoided restaurants, avoided his clubs, because every sideways glance felt like someone whispering, 3 moves. But while he sank, the janitor rose in ways he never imagined. Invitations poured in. Schools asked him to speak to children about perseverance. Churches wanted him to share his wisdom. Even chess tournaments reached out, hoping he would inspire young players. Yet he stayed humble. He still showed up at dawn with his mop, still whistled softly while polishing the floors. That humility made the story even more powerful, didn't it? Because real greatness doesn't need a spotlight, it shines on its own. One day, a group of employees cornered him in the break room. "Why didn't you ask for a raise, or at least a better position?" they asked. He smiled, eyes warm, and answered, "If respect comes only with titles, then it's not real respect. What I earned can't be bought." Think about that for a moment. Isn't that the kind of wisdom money can't touch? Meanwhile, the ex-CEO couldn't escape the memory. He replayed the game over and over in his mind, trying to convince himself he could have won if he had moved differently. But deep down, he knew it wasn't the moves. It was the man across from him. A man who had been underestimated his whole life until that day. And isn't it haunting, knowing your downfall came not from an equal, but from the very person I'll never thought to respect? In the office halls, whispers became open admiration. Employees walked taller, spoke bolder, inspired by the janitor's quiet courage. A revolution of respect had begun, not just for him, but for everyone who had ever been overlooked. And maybe that was the real checkmate, wasn't it? Not the board, not the pieces, but the shift in power that came when the invisible man finally became undeniable. And so the story came full circle. The man with everything lost it all in the blink of an eye, while the man with nothing gained something priceless: respect. Isn't it strange how the world works? Sometimes power is stripped not by force, not by wealth, but by wisdom wrapped in humility. That's what makes this tale unforgettable. The janitor never gloated, never bragged, never turned his victory into a weapon. Instead, he went back to sweeping floors, teaching by example that dignity doesn't depend on status. And isn't that the real checkmate? The game wasn't about kings and pawns on a wooden board. It was about kings and pawns in real life, about how quickly arrogance can crumble when truth stands tall. Think about it. How many times have people been written off because of the color of their skin, the job they hold, or the clothes they wear? How often do we let stereotypes blind us to brilliance right in front of us? This story tears down that illusion. It shouts what so many have been whispering for centuries. Respect cannot be bought, cannot be faked, cannot be denied forever. The CEO thought he was untouchable. He thought his money and power gave him control over everyone beneath him. But what he never realized was this: character will always outrank position. And when history remembers that office, it won't remember the suits, the titles, the marble floors. It will remember a black janitor who reminded the world that intelligence knows no boundaries. And maybe that's why the story resonates, because deep down, we've all been underestimated. We've all had someone look at us and think, "You're not enough." And isn't it satisfying to imagine proving them wrong in just 3 moves? That's the kind of victory no one can ever take away. So here's the lesson. Never underestimate anyone. Not the janitor, not the cashier, not the quiet neighbor who barely speaks. Because sometimes the people you overlook carry storms you can't see, and when they strike, the world shakes. If this story stirred something in you, if it made you think twice about respect, dignity, and the power of the unseen, then don't let it end here. Hit that subscribe button. Join us for more stories that peel back the layers of arrogance and remind us all that real power comes from truth.